that the judge or the Supreme Court judge was next in seniority to the Chief Justice.
Hello there, lovely viewers. Welcome to yet another exciting edition of Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. This is the show where we put Ghana first in all of our conversations. And on today's edition of the show, we'll be doing exactly that. Why do I say this? Because there's an uproar on social media and among civil society groups who are asking for further and better particulars in latest emerging details of the leasing of the Tema oil refinery to Torenco Asset Management Limited for 6 years. The government is expected to receive some 22 million cedis with a $1 million annual rent. If I mentioned 22 million cedis, I meant $22 million. And so $22 million and then an annual $1 million in rent, and an additional 1.018 in terms of rent, again, still in US dollars. A bit murky. When we return from this short break, we get into the details of this rather worrying announcement or revelation that has come up and get responses for you. This is Let's Talk Ghana. Stay with us. We're back shortly. So you're welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. I am your host, Eric Mawina. This show airs every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Studios 2 TV, on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. Let's get into the details and the revelations as made by Vice President of think tank Imani Africa has left many worried and expressing shock at the government over the planned leasing of the Tema oil refinery to Torenco Asset Management. The details, as has been made public in this allegation, if we can call it that, by Bright Simmons, amongst many other things, states that the Tema oil refinery has been leased to this rather new entity for up to 6 years. And the government is upfront getting 22 million US dollars, and the expectation is that there will be a $1 million US dollars payment of annual rent. What is interesting also is that there will be an additional $1.018 million monthly. How does it all tally together? Not quite sure how it all works. Those are in terms of rent. The expectation is that there will be up to 8 million barrels of crude refined at the Tema oil refinery every year, which would amount to some 2.7 plus billion US dollars really in terms of profit and revenue for Torenco. And so there are questions as to the selection process because it was done through sole sourcing. Also, letters and memos are seen from the staff of Tema oil refinery states that initially Vitol was expected to be partners of Torenco, but now it appears that that's not the case, and it has resulted in quite a lot of controversy, with a lot of Ghanaians expressing misgivings about the deal and asking questions. One of the individuals who've been asking questions is the second honorary vice president of Imani Africa, who's a private legal practitioner as well. He has been speaking to the media houses, Kofi Bentil, and asking that there be clarity from the Ghanaian government, and likened all of what we're seeing now to the ECG deal. He says that the right questions were asked during the ECG deal, and yet it didn't have financial guarantors or guarantees. And so this latest deal will have to be put under the microscope and be subjected to intense scrutiny. He's been speaking to the media. Let's just take a listen to what he's been saying.
We are not against, in principle, the divesting of the Tema refinery. We are not against selling it for profit, for value, of leasing it for profit or for value, or trying to make some economic sense of the Tema refinery. Now, as a going concern, our leaders have managed to just make nonsense of it because it keeps making losses. But Tema refinery has assets which are worth millions of dollars. which assets support a staff today, and which assets people are using today and making money, which is not accruing to the government. To that extent, therefore, anybody who purports or tries to sell it as a going concern is being disingenuous, because nobody will buy Tema refinery as a going concern for value, because it's not valuable in that sense as a refinery. But the assets of Tema refinery are good enough. So if we want to divest Tema refinery and want to do it honestly and genuinely, there has to be a lot of transparency. Two, it cannot be simply as a going concern and take it, net value, which is a loss or a negative, and then more or less parcel it in some kind of, unclear ways to a crony who then comes, rearranges things and starts making millions. Then that transparency also must be such that we have a number of options we pick from. Our problem with this particular deal is that it's totally opaque. We have to go underground and find all kinds of ways to get, the documentation we have now and review it. And the deal is bad. We don't know who the real directors are, and our checks are showing that they are fronts for other people. It's unfortunate, and we hope that is clarified. Who are the people behind, the present lease? And why it is important is that who stands behind this deal lends or says a lot about their credibility and what they come to the table with. Because of our experience, and recently we had the case of PDS. I use the case of PDS because in the case of PDS, similar to this, we had an electricity company which was doing well, unlike Tema refinery, which is not doing well at all, but had significant problems, and we wanted to improve it. Behind that, there was a lot of transparency. We knew who were coming in. There were international bidding arrangements, etc. Somebody had put in money. It was under the scrutiny of the US government, and our government, all civil society organizations were involved. But we still ended up giving it to PDS. And PDS, through Meralco, clearly there were questions about who they were. And because we didn't do a good job of securing, their bona fides and what they were bringing to the table in terms of finances, ultimately the deal failed. Despite all the scrutiny. Compare that to this one where we don't know the people, we don't know how much money they are bringing. It is not clear what they are being given, but clearly they are ring-fencing the viable assets of Tema refinery to allocate it to themselves, leaving the debt with the government, and hopefully they want to make money off the assets. And there's something to the effect that if they don't do it, then maybe we are going to go back and claw back what we've gotten after they've used it. To put it in concise terms, we are happy with the divestment of Tema refinery, but it must be transparent. The people who are interested in it must show their hand, show what they come with. We should check their bona fides.
Right.
Okay. We should know how much money they are bringing, and because of the lessons of PDS, they have to have sufficient security so that if anything doesn't go well, we will not end up in a situation of PDS where now we have to claw back and then at a loss.
So that's that's Kofi Bentil rather speaking there in that interview. Let's get on the telephone lines now. Duncan Amoise, Executive Director of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, an individual who's been frontal in the conversations on the Tema oil refinery. Let's get a lot more from him. Mr. Amoa, many thanks for speaking to us this morning. So in terms of the details, as we've seen on this Torenco lease has been given to them by the Ghanaian government, why is it a bad deal for us?
To begin, I doubt we have signed an agreement as a country to give TOR as an entity to Torenco asset managers. No. What I know is that previously there was another economic arrangement that was aimed at getting the Tema oil refinery back to processing, on a revolving basis.
Right.
That agreement was between TOR and a company known as Tema Capital, who we knew had some significant workings with Vitor, one of the oil giants.
Right.
As we speak, the Tema Capital deal seem to have been repackaged for TAM, that is the Torenco Asset Managers. Per our checks and background, this Torenco company formed somewhere 1st January 2023 has a stated capital of some 500,000 Ghana cedis. That alone
is a red flag.
Them from taking over our refinery, which is valued in excess of hundreds of millions of US dollars.
Right.
There's no fallback for any such agreement, because the company that you are seeking to hand over, even if that is the case, does not have the capacity, both the technical and the economic. And so, as far as I know, the Public Procurement Authority, PPA, through the board, have, as it were, washed its hands off any such thing.
Right.
And have rather referred to the Finance Ministry if they feel this is something they should do, because they cannot, per the available details to them, approve any such takeover by TAM or Torenco. And so I wonder why we are even saying the company has been sold. As far as I know, Tor has not been sold yet. If there are plans to sell, maybe that will be best known to those in authority. But as far as the Torenco decimal capital initial agreement were, one company metamorphosized into another, and gradually the people to even do the approving have come to realize that the new company so formed to take over the operations of Tor do not have the capacity. That is where I think all of this should end. There's no takeover that we know on paper that has been agreed yet.
Right. So, yes, no takeover, that's a statement of fact. But just looking at the content of what it is that has become public, yes, the agreement is yet to be finalized. You've mentioned rightly that the PPA has washed its hands off it. But some of the details, as we've been learning of, some 8 million barrels of crude potentially to be refined, all of this capacity appears to quite exist, and yet we have failed to be able to make use of it, and or finally deciding. The chorus generally is that it will be better off to privatize Tor for a while.
Well, I do believe that Tema refinery has a maximum 6 weeks within which it has to come back to productivity. If we do not see something done within the next 6 weeks in view of the refining arrangements across the sub-region currently, i.e. The Dangote refinery coming on stream by end of this month, i.e. the Chinese refinery coming on stream by end of July, if we do not find a proper working arrangement for Tor, Tor will cease to exist after 6 weeks from now. And so whilst we are even discussing value for money, something, worth pursuing as far as commercial interest of the state in Tor is concerned, we should also be mindful of the time limits available to all of us, especially those following this whole Tema refinery discourses. If we don't do anything about it as soon as practicable, we will not even have a refinery at all to exist anytime in the foreseeable future, and you and I would not have anything as a state to talk of as far as the refining space in Ghana, and for that matter, the sub-region is concerned. And we have just 6 weeks. If we work hard enough, we might be able to get a worthy partner that is capable of injecting the necessary investments to ensure that Tor has enough that it can probably refine on a revolving basis. Anything other than this, I don't see how any entity called Tor would continue to exist beyond the next 6 weeks.
And do you get the sense that there's this urgency on the part of government, these rather worrying revelations that you're making?
That is the only caution we can send to government, that it is quite urgent, that just like the worker unions in recent times were agitating for, it has become very crucial that authorities put in place an urgent mechanism to forestall even the exodus of the technical workforce of Tema Oil Refinery, who, as I speak with you, a lot of them are moving to places like Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, just to find, other refineries to work with. If we are not able to package anything with time in mind, there will come a time when the central refinery with a capacity to refine 100,000 barrels a day, will be able to meet the Ghanaian market demand, and there won't be any need for toll any further, because those are ultra-modern refineries that may come in with a greater efficiency simply because they are also coming in as private refineries that may put efficiency in economics ahead of the politics that we have put before whatever we have done with the Tema oil refinery.
Ms. Amwa, I want to thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you, Eric.
Right then, that's Duncan Amwa. He is the executive director of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana. And so laying it bare how worrying it is, not just the details of the agreement. He says that, well, that really is not on the table now, but within 6 weeks, if we cannot get a good enough deal to make the Tema oil refinery functional, we could be out of business as Ghana owning a refinery. When we return, there's a conversation that's been kick-started by the House of Chiefs as to a number of issues. We'll return and get into the details shortly. This is Let's Talk Ghana. Stay with us. We're back shortly. Right, you're welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. Let's get into our final conversation for today. It has to do with the National House of Chiefs, because they are making the case for a review of the appointment of the Chief Justice in the country. As you'd recall, there was a recent appointment of a Chief Justice, her ladyship, Justice Gertrude Tokonu. She was appointed or nominated first off by the President in consultation with the Council of State. It went to Parliament, they vetted her, and then she returned and was sworn in by the President. Well, the National House of Chiefs believe that that entire process ought to change. And Togbi Teprehodo IV, who is the President of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs, has been speaking at an IEA event, has been making the case.
A couple of years ago, Mr. Justice Apalu was then the Chief Justice. When he retired, his position was taken over by Justice Soa. I think after Justice Soa came Justice Archer. And then after Justice Archer, Justice Aban. I think it was just following that convention that the judge, or the Supreme Court judge, was next in seniority to the Chief Justice. What is happening now is, again, because of the fact that the Supreme Court is a human institution, serves to demoralize the judges. Picture this. I have worked in the Supreme Court for all these years, and it is now my turn to become the Chief Justice, by virtue of the fact that I am next in seniority to the incumbent. And then suddenly I am passed over, and maybe a relatively junior justice is over me as Chief Justice. Naturally, such a person would feel demoralized. That unwritten convention whereby the judge who is next in seniority to the Chief Justice becomes the Chief Justice, if he was qualified enough to be appointed to the Supreme Court. I think he is qualified enough to become the Chief Justice if he is next in seniority to the incumbent. A couple of years ago, Mr. Justice Apalu was then the Chief Justice. When he retired, his position was taken over by Justice Soa. I think after Justice Soa came Justice Archer. And then after Justice Archer, Justice Aban. I think it was just following that convention that the judge, or the Supreme Court judge, was next in seniority to the Chief Justice. What is happening now is, again, because of the fact that the Supreme Court is a human institution, serves to demoralize the judges. Picture this. I have worked in the Supreme Court for all these years, and it is now my turn to become a Chief Justice by virtue of the fact that I am next in seniority to the incumbent. And then suddenly I am passed over, and maybe a relatively junior justice is over me as Chief Justice. Naturally, such a person would feel demoralized.
That's Stogby Teprehudu the fourth. He's the president of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs, and that's how we'll end today's edition of Let's Talk Ghana. But I will not leave you just like that. As a video I'm going to leave you with as to why men more often than not die a lot quicker than women, because we engage in some very reckless games. I am Eric Mawenagbeta. Till we meet again, there's a good laugh you can have.
Oliver.
Studios 2 TV. The truth is here in your eyes.